May was glowing that morning, carefully putting on her dress and fixing her hair. It was her big day marrying Scott. To everyone else it was a celebration, but for David, sitting in his chair in the next room, it was complicated. Scott wasn't just May's groom, he was David's ex-husband. David's chest tightened at the thought, but he didn't want to let bitterness ruin May's happiness. She deserves support, he whispered to himself, even though the sting in his heart said otherwise. Ian came in with the Hoyer lift, smiling softly. "All right, buddy, let's get you ready. You sure you want to go?" Will stood by the doorway, arms crossed. "Are you sure about this, bro? Nobody would blame you if you stayed home." David gave a tired but determined look. "Yeah, I'm sure I need to be there for her." His voice cracked a little, but Ian pretended not to notice. With practiced care, Ian slipped the sling under him, clipped the straps, and lifted him from the bed. David's catheter line was checked, his double diapers snugly taped, and Ian tucked his tux jacket neatly over everything. "Looking sharp," Ian said, lowering him gently into the chair. David gave a small laugh. "Sharp enough for a wedding with my ex? Guess that's the start of today's ABDL story." That's a powerful emotional beat. Here's a continuation with your idea polished into story form. The church bells rang softly as guests shuffled into their seats. May stood in the back with her bouquet, beaming, while Scott adjusted his tie nervously near the altar. He hadn't expected to see David roll in, tux neat and chair polished, Ian and Will close at his side. Scott's eyes widened. "David, I thought you weren't coming." His voice cracked with genuine surprise. David gave a dry laugh, though his chest felt heavy. "I wasn't sure I should." But he paused, glancing toward May. "Once you two lock lips at that altar, I'll know it's real, that it's not just some way for you to circle back into my life through her." The room went still for a second. Scott looked caught off guard, but May gently touched her brother's shoulder as she passed. "Thank you for being here, David. It means more than you know." David gave her a small nod. His diapers rustled softly under the tux as he shifted in his chair, the sound hidden by the music starting up. Ian leaned close and whispered, "Proud of you, man." David forced a smile. "Just want to see her happy, even if it breaks me a little." Will, Ian, and David had a front row view. The three of them sat together, May just visible in the back as the music swelled. David leaned forward, his voice low and sharp. "I bet you $200-300 this whole thing is just to get a rise out of me." Ian raised his brows but stayed calm. Will shook his head. "I know you're hurting, David, but what if you're wrong?" David's jaw clenched. "Then he lied to me, acted gay all those years only to turn around and marry my twin." He let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. "You tell me how that's fair." Will put a steady hand on his brother's arm. "Not everything's about you, bro. Maybe Scott really does love her. Maybe this isn't some game." Across the aisle, May adjusted her bouquet from her power chair, rolling forward with dignity. The sight softened David's expression, but only a little. He muttered, "She doesn't deserve to be caught in the middle of this. She deserves someone who'll stand by her, chair and all." Ian gave him a quiet look. "Then let's wait and see. You don't have to bet on pain, just watch." David swallowed hard, eyes fixed on Scott at the altar. The music quieted and the minister's voice filled the church. May's vows were tender, full of promises of love and loyalty. Scott followed with practiced words, his eyes darting briefly toward David more than once. David sat rigid in his chair, heart pounding beneath his tux jacket. He barely heard the words, he was waiting for the proof. "You may now kiss the bride." Scott leaned in, kissed May softly, and as the guests clapped, his hand curled behind her back just enough for David to see. He flicked his middle finger toward him, a smirk barely hidden under the cheers. David's stomach dropped, his face went stone cold. "I got my answer," he muttered darkly. He turned his chair toward the aisle. "Let's go." David," Will started, seeing people staring, but David cut him off. "I don't give a fuck if they're looking, let's go." His voice carried, sharp enough that a few heads turned in confusion. Ian quickly grabbed the chair's push handles, guiding him toward the exit as the room buzzed with whispers. May didn't see, her eyes were closed, basking in the applause, but Scott's smirk followed David all the way out. The music carried into the reception hall, glasses clinking and laughter spilling across the tables. But the tension in the air hadn't gone unnoticed. People whispered about David storming out. May, sitting proudly in her power chair, raised her hand for quiet. I need everyone's attention. Her voice trembled but held firm. That man who just left David, he's my twin brother. And yes, he has a traumatic brain injury. He's lived through more than most of us can imagine. If he seemed upset tonight, it's because he's carrying a lot of pain. I love him, and I won't let anyone here forget that he deserves respect too. The room hushed. A few guests nodded solemnly, others looked away awkwardly. Scott's smirk faltered, but he said nothing. Back at his apartment, the door clicked shut behind Ian and Will as they helped David inside. As soon as his chair stopped rolling, his emotions broke loose. "Fuck my life," David shouted, tears spilling as he ripped at his tux jacket. His double diapers crinkled beneath him, the sound sharp in the silence. "He married her just to hurt me. He'll never stop finding ways to break me." Will crouched in front of him, eyes full of pity. "Bro, don't do this to yourself. You don't deserve that kind of pain." But David buried his face in his hands, shoulders shaking. Ian rested a gentle hand on his back, saying nothing, just letting him cry until the storm inside wore itself down. The reception carried on, but Pastor Ron hadn't touched his food. He sat stiffly at the head table, watching whispers ripple through the guests like wildfire. Finally, he stood, his voice booming over the chatter. "Enough, everybody should know the truth." The room fell silent. May froze in her chair, eyes wide. Scott's smirk tightened. Ron continued, his hands gripping the edge of the table. "David doesn't have a traumatic brain injury. That was not why he left this place upset. The real reason," he looked directly at Scott, his jaw set, "is that Scott, May's new husband, is David's ex-husband, and that is why I did not give her away, nor did I officiate this service." Gasps shot across the room. A few people covered their mouths, others turned in shock to look at May and Scott. May's hands trembled around her bouquet. Scott tried to laugh it off, waving a hand. "That's old history, doesn't matter now." But the damage was done. The joyful celebration had soured into uneasy silence, the truth hanging heavy over every table. The air was already heavy with Ron's words when Pat, May's mother, shot up from her chair. Her face was red with rage, and before anyone could react, she stormed across the floor and slapped Ron hard across the face. The crack echoed through the hall. "You ruined your only daughter's second wedding," she screamed, voice trembling with fury. Guests gasped, some clutching their drinks tighter. Ron staggered but held his ground, cheek burning. "The truth needed to be said, Pat." Pat jabbed a finger at him, her voice venomous. "David is a fag, so what? Your daughter saved Scott from going to hell like David. You should be grateful instead of poisoning this day." The room erupted into murmurs, some shocked, some disgusted, some whispering agreement. May sat frozen in her power chair, tears welling in her eyes. Scott wrapped an arm around her, but it looked more like possession than comfort. Ron's eyes softened as he looked past Pat, straight to May. "I told the truth because I love you, May. I couldn't stand by while lies destroyed our family." Pat shook with rage, her hand still raised as if she wanted to strike again. The crowd was divided, the reception in chaos. That evening, the apartment was quiet. David had finally cried himself to sleep, curled in his chair with a blanket draped over him. Ian sat nearby with his phone while Will picked at a bag of chips, both giving him space. A knock came at the door. Will opened it to find Pastor Ron standing there, looking weary but determined. "How is he?" Ron asked softly. Ian glanced back at the chair. "He's napping, worn himself out." Ron stepped inside, lowering his voice. "Let me give you an update." He took a breath, his voice low and heavy. "After you three left, May told everyone David had a traumatic brain injury, trying to soften what happened. I couldn't let that stand. I told the truth, told everyone the reason I didn't walk her down the aisle or do the ceremony was because Scott is David's ex-husband." Will sighed. "And how'd that go over?" Ron's face darkened. "Pat slapped me, said I ruined her only daughter's second wedding, but I couldn't stand there and let the whole room believe a lie." Just then, David stirred. His eyes blinked open, groggy but listening. He looked at Ron, voice still hoarse from crying. "Thank you for telling the truth." Ron's eyes softened. "Always, son, always." David was still in his chair, blanket tucked around him, when his phone buzzed on the side table. Ian handed it over. It was Liam calling. David answered, his voice still rough. "Yeah. Bro, Liam's voice was urgent. May's wedding is viral, like everywhere. Your meltdown, Pastor Ron getting slapped, and the truth he dropped, it's all over TikTok, Instagram, everything. David's stomach turned. Great, now the whole world knows. Liam kept going. Listen though, the comments, a lot of people are actually on your side. One that blew up said David was strong because if it was me, they'd lock up a crippled man for less. And the pastor is right. I don't care if it's my kid's wedding, you tell the truth. They ended it with a hashtag that's trending now, Stand with David. Will leaned over David's shoulder, eyes wide. You're trending, bro, and not in a bad way. Ian gave a little smile. Guess people see what you've been carrying. David swallowed hard, staring at the phone screen as the notifications piled up. For the first time that day, he felt something other than bitterness, just a flicker of validation. Back at the reception hall, May scrolled through her phone, watching the viral posts, the trending hashtags, and the endless comments about David, Pastor Ron, and her wedding. Guests whispered as they passed her, some casting guilty glances, but she didn't flinch. Her lips pressed into a thin line and she shrugged lightly. Looks like everyone's talking," she said casually to Scott, who leaned in beside her, clearly unsure how to respond. Scott muttered something about family drama, but May waved it off. I don't care, let them talk, let them think what they want, it doesn't change anything here. Even when a notification popped up showing the hashtag Stand with David trending worldwide, she scrolled past it without a second thought. Her focus stayed on the celebration, her dress, the photos, the ceremony she wanted. Meanwhile, the world outside buzzed with sympathy and outrage for David, but inside May remained untouched, almost cold in her indifference. May glanced at Scott, scrolling past the trending posts and the flurry of messages on her phone. He leaned closer, voice firm and almost defiant. It's our day, Scott said, eyes locked on hers. We don't give a fuck what anyone else says, David's just being a baby about this. Let him cry, let him get mad, it doesn't matter. May's lips curled into a small, satisfied smile. Exactly. Scott smiled back, brushing a strand of hair from her face. I love you and I married you, that's what counts, not the internet, not your brother, not Pastor Ron, nothing else. He leaned in, kissing her gently as if sealing the statement. Around them, the wedding chaos buzzed on screens and phones, but to Scott and May, it was like the world outside had disappeared. A few days after the chaotic wedding, the house was quiet, but tension still lingered in the air. Tom, curious and blunt, looked up at his mother as they sat in the living room. Mom, what's a man whore? He asked, innocent but clearly confused. May's eyes narrowed, her voice sharp and commanding. Tom, you are grounded, go to your room. Tom hesitated, sensing the storm in her tone, but I don't care who said it to you, May interrupted, standing over him, but you know we don't use that language in this house. Do you understand me? Yes, Mom, Tom mumbled, trudging toward his room, cheeks red. May watched him go, shaking her head slightly, then returned to her phone, her expression unreadable. The household rules were clear, no matter the chaos outside or the drama still unfolding with David. Later that evening, Tom shuffled out of his room, his eyes still wet from being scolded. He handed May his phone nervously. Here, Mom, but Dad's the one who said it, by the way. May froze. What? Tom bit his lip. Dad said Scott is a man whore, that's where I heard it. May's jaw tightened. Without another word, she snatched the phone and dialed Henry. He picked up on the second ring. Henry, May snapped, skipping any greeting. Did you call Scott a man whore in front of Tom? On the other end, Henry sighed. No, he overheard me. I was talking to my family, venting, and yeah, maybe Tom and maybe Peter heard me. May's voice sharpened. Do you realize what that does to the kids? You put me in the position of punishing him for something you said. Henry's tone softened, almost regretful. I didn't mean for him to hear it, May, but I can't take it back now. May pinched the bridge of her nose, glancing toward Tom's room. This family doesn't need more fuel for drama, next time watch your words. Henry stayed quiet for a long beat. I'll call him tomorrow, I'll make it right. May's voice carried sharply from the kitchen. Peter, come to the living room, bring your phone too. From down the hall came a pause, then a stubborn reply, no. May's patience snapped, she stormed into his room holding out her hand. Give me the phone now. Peter crossed his arms. Why, I didn't do anything. But May didn't argue, she simply plucked it from his grip with the practiced swiftness of a mother who wouldn't be denied. That's mine until I say otherwise. Peter huffed, this isn't fair. May ignored his protest, turning away without explanation. She had already seen enough flashes of notifications and half-watched videos to know why she wanted control of it. Videos of the wedding fight, the slap, Pastor Ron's truth, it was all there, and she didn't want Peter glued to it. But she didn't tell him that, instead she pointed toward the couch. Go read, you've got books in your room, use them. Peter stomped away, muttering under his breath. May slipped the phone into her pocket, her face tight, hiding the storm of worry she refused to share aloud. Peter stomped back into the living room, arms crossed, glaring at his mom. It's not fair you took my phone. May's eyes snapped to him, her tone sharp and defensive. Don't blame me, Peter, blame your ass of an Uncle David, he did this. Peter frowned, Uncle David, he wasn't even here. May sighed, sitting back in her chair. He's the reason those videos even exist. He's the reason your phone's full of garbage that doesn't belong in this house. If he hadn't made a scene, none of this would have happened. Peter looked down, chewing his lip. He didn't fully understand, but the anger in his mom's voice was enough to make him stay quiet. May leaned forward, lowering her tone. So no more arguing, you'll get your phone back when I decide you're ready. Until then, go read like I told you. Peter turned, shoulders slumped, heading back to his room. Behind him, May clenched the phone in her fist, her eyes hard. Blamming David made it easier to swallow the chaos she couldn't control. Monday morning came too quickly. Peter tugged at his backpack straps as he and Tom walked toward the bus stop. The air was cool, but their stomachs twisted with nerves. Everyone at school had phones, everyone saw the videos. It was only a matter of time before whispers started. Tom glanced sideways at his brother. Hey, remember, people might talk today about Mom, about Uncle David, about Scott. Peter bit his lip. Yeah, I know. Tom nudged him lightly with his elbow. Don't give them any energy, that's what Dad always says. If they say something, just let it slide, don't feed it. Peter nodded, though his chest still felt tight. Okay, I'll try. The bus pulled up, brakes squealing, kids already chattering inside. As they climbed aboard, Tom leaned close and whispered one last time. Just remember, we know the truth, that's enough. Peter gave a small nod, bracing himself as they found their seats, ready for whatever the day might bring. It didn't take long. By mid-morning, the whispers had grown louder in the halls. Phones buzzed under desks, kids snickered over clips of the wedding gone viral. One boy muttered too loudly, man, if I was in that crazy family, I'd kill myself. Like who marries their brother's husband? Another chimed in, I heard the brother and sister both got SMA or something. Whole family's messed up. Peter's face went hot, his fists clenched. He tried to remember Tom's words, don't give them energy, but when another kid laughed, Peter snapped. I need all of you to shut the fuck up, he shouted, standing halfway out of his chair. The classroom went dead silent. The teacher froze for a second, then slammed her book shut. Peter Smith, office, now. Peter's heart pounded as everyone stared. Some kids smirked, others looked shocked. He grabbed his backpack and stormed toward the door, muttering under his breath. The whispers followed him out, heavier than before. Peter sat stiffly in the chair across from the principal's desk, cheeks still red. He explained what happened, the whispers, the videos, the cruel comments about his family. His fists were still tight in his lap. The principal nodded slowly. Thank you for being honest, Peter. I understand this is difficult, but shouting profanity in class isn't acceptable. We'll talk more once a parent arrives. You said you want us to call your dad, not your mom. Peter's eyes flashed. Yeah, call my dad. The principal raised an eyebrow but picked up the phone anyway. Just then, the loudspeaker crackled overhead. Tom Smith to the principal's office. Tom Smith, report to the office. Down the hall, Tom groaned, slapping his forehead. My dumbass little brother can't keep his mouth shut. His teacher raised an eyebrow at him. Excuse me, Tom. Tom shrugged with a smirk. Yeah, I'm going. He slung his bag over his shoulder and headed out, muttering all the way. Henry's phone buzzed as he sat at his desk. He answered quickly, his face going tight as he listened. Hanging up, he dialed May. Something happened with the boys, Henry said flatly. The school needs both of us right now. May froze, her stomach sinking. What do you mean both of us? They didn't give me details, Henry replied, already grabbing his keys, but it's serious. As May pulled into the school parking lot, she could already hear the commotion inside. A boy's voice echoed down the hall, yelling about what he'd seen online. A woman teacher's voice cut through sharply, "Get back to class now." May's heart thudded. At that point, she knew whatever this was, it had to be about David, Scott, and the wedding. By the time she pushed through the office doors, Henry was just stepping in too. Their eyes met briefly, strained, full of old tension, but neither said a word. Behind the glass window, Peter and Tom sat stiffly in chairs side by side, both looking like they'd been through a storm. The principal motioned for Henry and May to sit, but the tension was already thick in the air. Peter and Tom watched silently, sensing the storm about to break. Henry leaned forward, voice sharp and controlled. "May, you ruined your brother's life, but you're not ruining my son's lives, not if I can help it." May's eyes flared. "What are you talking about?" "I want full custody of Peter and Tom," Henry said flatly, his tone leaving no room for debate. "After today, it's clear you can't keep them out of chaos or protect them from this family drama. I'm taking responsibility. They'll be safe with me." May recoiled as if struck. You can't just decide that." "Yes, I can and I will if necessary. I'm not letting David's mess spill over onto my kids," Henry snapped. The principal cleared his throat, trying to mediate, but the boys sat frozen, unsure where to look. The tension was suffocating, the air charged with anger, betrayal, and the weight of family drama that had spiraled far beyond a single wedding. Peter's jaw tightened, Tom's hands clenched in his lap. They both knew this fight wasn't just about them. May's fingers shook as she dialed David's number. The moment he picked up, her voice spat like fire through the receiver. "You fag," she screamed, her words sharp and cruel. "You made me lose my kids, rot in hell, David." David, still at home with Ian and Will, froze mid-breath, the anger and exhaustion from the wedding and family chaos pressing down on him. His grip on the phone tightened, knuckles white. I didn't do this," David said finally, his voice low but steady, trying to stay calm. "This is your choice, your actions. You can't blame me for what you've done." May's voice rose even higher, echoing with fury. "Don't talk back to me, you ruined everything, you ruined me." Ian stepped closer to David, resting a hand lightly on his shoulder. "Ignore her, man, don't let her get under your skin." Will leaned in, voice firm. "She's angry, yeah, but it's her mess, not yours, don't take it." David closed his eyes, letting the words wash over him. The fury, the hatred, it didn't touch him the way it used to. He had his brothers, his home, and the truth on his side. "Yeah, whatever," he said finally, voice quiet but resolute. "I'm done with this." David's phone rang just as he was settling back into his chair with Ian and Will nearby. The caller ID showed Henry. He hesitated, then answered, "Yeah." Henry's voice was tense but controlled. "David, I'm sorry to bother you, but I need you. Your name carries weight and I need you at the custody hearing. I'm trying to get full custody of Peter and Tom. Scott is not the father of my kids and I can't let May's anger destroy them." David's brow furrowed. "You want me there to testify or just be present?" "Both," Henry said firmly. "I know our history isn't simple, but right now it's about protecting the boys. Can I count on you?" David looked at Ian and Will, who gave him supportive nods. He exhaled slowly. "All right, I'll do it for the boys." Henry's voice softened. "Thank you, David, this means a lot. I'll send you the details for the hearing. We can't let May's anger ruin their lives." David hung up, feeling the weight of yet another family battle. But this time he had purpose. He wasn't just reacting, he was standing up for the kids who couldn't defend themselves. David leaned back in his power chair, staring at the ceiling, lost in thought about the upcoming custody hearing. The weight of family drama pressed down on him, but Will sat down beside him, eyes serious. "After you help these kids," Will said, voice low but firm, "stay the fuck away from May, bro. This isn't about friends or roommates anymore. This is a big brother and little brother chat." David turned to him, raising an eyebrow. "I mean it," Will continued, leaning closer. "Stay away, protect the boys, yeah, but don't get dragged back into her chaos. She's toxic, and this is bigger than anything we've dealt with before." David exhaled slowly, letting the words sink in. "All right," he said quietly, voice steady. "I'll help them, then I'm done. I'll stay out of her way." Will nodded, satisfied. "Good, that's the smart move. Keep your distance once the boys are safe. That's the line we don't cross." David gave a small, resolute nod, the first glimmer of control he'd felt in days. For once, he had a plan and boundaries he wasn't afraid to enforce. The courtroom was hushed, the air thick with anticipation. David sat in his power chair beside Henry, eyes scanning the room. He spotted Scott walking in, composed, smug even, and taking a seat behind Henry's legal team. The sight made David's chest tighten. As Scott settled, he slid a small folded note across the table to Henry's side. The lawyer picked it up discreetly, glancing at Henry before reading it. Henry's eyes widened slightly as he unfolded the paper. The note was shocking. Tom had told May that Scott was gay, and now May, in her fury, was allegedly sending Scott to a conversion camp. Henry's jaw clenched. This is serious. David's fingers tightened around the arm of his chair. He could feel the weight of the betrayal and chaos settling over him again, but this time he was ready to stand firm. He whispered to Will, who was beside him, "This is it. Time to protect the boys and keep that psycho May from dragging anyone else into her mess." Will nodded grimly. "Yeah bro, eyes forward, stay focused." The courtroom quieted as the judge entered. All eyes were on the unfolding drama, unaware just how explosive the next moments would become. The courtroom was tense. Henry's lawyer stood, voice steady but edged with incredulity. "Your Honor," the lawyer began, "my client's ex-wife's brother just handed this over. Be warned, it may anger you. The contents are disturbing." The judge took the note, unfolded it, and began to read silently. His eyes narrowed as he scanned the lines. Murmurs spread through the courtroom. "I wish this were illegal," the judge muttered under his breath, voice low but audible. "Your Honor, what is the status?" May's lawyer asked, leaning forward, trying to assert control. The judge looked up sharply. "May should read this aloud herself," he said, his tone leaving no room for evasion. "She wrote it, let the court hear it." All eyes shifted to May, who sat rigid in her chair, her face pale, the weight of the courtroom and her own words pressed down on her. David's eyes locked on hers, unflinching. He knew this was the moment truth would finally have its say. The judge leaned back slightly, lowering his voice so only those near the bench could hear. "Off the record, I'm gay, by the way." A ripple of surprise passed through the courtroom, but the judge quickly regained his composure. "Now, back on the record, resume, read it aloud, please." May's hands trembled as she took the note. Her lawyer leaned in close, whispering, "Just read it, don't add anything, stick to the words." Swallowing hard, May began, her voice shaking. Each word hung heavy in the room, the truth she had tried to hide now exposed to everyone. The courtroom listened in stunned silence, eyes fixed on her as the note's contents, about Tom, Scott, and the alleged conversion camp, were revealed. David sat straighter in his power chair, the tension in his chest easing just slightly. This was the moment the truth could no longer be ignored. The courtroom air grew thick with tension. May's lawyer leaned forward, voice sharp and unwavering. "Your Honor," he said, "my client's children revoke her rights to the children." May froze, eyes wide. "What are you doing?" she shouted, her voice cracking. "It's my job," her lawyer replied calmly, his gaze fixed on the judge. The judge nodded, his gavel ready. "Mr. Henry, you have full custody of the children." May's jaw dropped, disbelief washing over her. "No, this can't be." Her lawyer interjected, almost casually, "Oh, and off the record, I'm gay." The courtroom erupted into murmurs, some stunned, some whispering furiously. David sat back in his power chair, a mix of relief and exhaustion washing over him. Finally, justice, messy, chaotic, and dramatic as it was, had sided with the children's safety. David pushed his power chair slowly through the courthouse doors, sunlight hitting his face. Henry walked beside him, his expression tired but resolute. Peter and Tom followed closely, both relieved yet exhausted from the whirlwind of the morning. The boys clung to Henry's hand, glancing at David with admiration. For once, they felt protected and safe. Scott approached cautiously, his usual smirk replaced by a rare expression of sincerity. I'm sorry, he said quietly, eyes meeting David's. David didn't immediately respond. He exhaled slowly, letting the weight of months of chaos finally settle. Yeah, well, let's just focus on keeping these kids safe, he said, voice calm but firm. Henry nodded. That's the priority now. Everything else can wait. As they walked toward the parking lot, the city bustling around them, a quiet sense of victory settled over the small group. They were drained, emotionally battered, but for the first time in weeks there was clarity and a future where the boys could feel secure. David glanced at Peter and Tom, a small, protective smile forming. We did good today, he said softly. Back at the apartment, the boys were unpacking their school bags, still quiet from the morning's chaos. Henry poured coffee, glancing at David as he wheeled in. David paused, taking a deep breath. All right, what should we be ready for on Monday? Peter looked up, still wary but trying to focus. Just school stuff, teachers, homework, the usual, and maybe ignore what other kids are saying about, the wedding. Tom nodded in agreement. Yeah, don't let them get to you, stick with us if anyone tries to start anything. Henry leaned against the counter, voice steady. Monday's going to be calm compared to what we went through, but we need a plan. Focus on the kids' routine, keep them grounded. And David, just keep yourself in your lane, no letting May or Scott drag you back into nonsense. David exhaled, feeling a small sense of control return. Got it. Routine, focus, protect the boys, and stay out of May's chaos. Monday's just another day. Will, who had been sitting nearby, nodded. Yeah, bro, and we've got your back, don't stress it. For the first time in weeks, David felt a flicker of normalcy, just enough to face the week ahead. Later that evening, David and Tom sat together in the living room. The chaos of the past week still hung over them, but the apartment felt quieter, safer. David leaned forward, voice gentle but firm. Even though you told your mom that you're gay. Tom's eyes widened. I'm not gay, Uncle David. I just thought if she could be more understanding for you, it would help. I hated when she lied to everyone at the wedding. David nodded slowly, understanding the weight of Tom's intentions. I get it, kiddo. It wasn't easy for anyone to watch her chaos, but I appreciate you trying to help me, even if it wasn't exactly what she needed to hear. Tom's gaze dropped, voice quiet. Scott, he cried for you, Uncle David, said he married Mom to try to break down her gay phobia. I'm sorry for what she put you through. David felt a lump in his throat, overwhelmed by the mixture of guilt, relief, and affection. He reached out and ruffled Tom's hair gently. It's okay, Tom, you did your best, that's all anyone can ask for. For a moment, they sat in silence, the bonds of family, messy, complicated, but real, holding them together. Scott appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Tom, sitting beside David, stiffened. You told him, Scott asked, eyes flicking between the two. Tom nodded, shrugging slightly. Yep. Scott let out a slow breath. Your dad needs you, and I need to talk with your uncle for a bit. David's eyes narrowed, his body tense in the power chair. All right, he said cautiously. We can talk, but don't try anything shady. Tom shifted uncomfortably, glancing between the two. I'll be over here, he mumbled, keeping his distance but watching carefully. Scott stepped closer to David, lowering his voice. I just need a moment to clear the air for the boys. David studied him for a long beat, weighing the sincerity in Scott's eyes. Finally, he nodded. Fine, let's talk, but I'm watching every word. The room grew quiet except for the hum of the city outside, both men poised for a tense but necessary conversation. Scott explaining his intentions about the wedding and May to David. David, you were right. David said, you was Sa Ying. Everybody forgot I read people. Scott, you hunt me deeply and Vern, you and me are cool. We are not get back Tojter and Dorvin Sive ask Ian to put in bed. Here, that scene, capturing Scott's explanation and the tense but honest resolution between him and David. Scene 29, Scott explains. Scott took a deep breath, his eyes fixed on David. David, you were right. David's brow furrowed, arms crossed. You were saying, everyone forgot I read people, Scott, I saw everything. Scott's shoulders slumped. Yeah, I know, I hunted you deeply and I'm sorry, I never should have put you through that. I wasn't thinking about the consequences, just trying to prove something to May, but I see now how wrong that was. David let out a long, measured breath, his voice low but steady. Scott, you hurt me deeply, but I get it. I accept your apology, but this doesn't mean we're getting back together, ever, and don't even think about driving inside the house again. Scott nodded, a hint of relief crossing his face. Understood, no more games, I just wanted you to know the truth for real this time. David looked toward Ian, who had been quietly standing nearby. Ian, put me in bed, I need to rest after all this. Ian nodded, helping David settle into bed while Scott stepped back, giving them space. The tension in the room eased slightly, the long shadows of family chaos finally lifting enough for clarity and a fragile sense of closure. A soft knock echoed at the bedroom door. Go away, David croaked, voice trembling, tears streaking his face. The door cracked open a little and Will's calm, steady presence appeared. David, it's me, can I come in? David shook his head, trying to swallow his sobs. No, just please leave me alone. Will stepped closer, voice gentle but firm. Hey, it's okay, you're having a panic attack, aren't you? David nodded, tears spilling over. Yes, just please leave. Will crouched beside the bed, keeping his tone soft. I'm not leaving, not yet, but I'm not going to crowd you either, just breathe with me, okay? In and out slowly. David's body shook as he followed Will's guidance, trying to match the slow rhythm. Will stayed by his side, silent but supportive, giving David the space he needed while making sure he wasn't alone. Minutes passed, the sobs softened, and though David's panic hadn't fully disappeared, the tight grip of fear eased slightly under Will's quiet, steady presence. A soft knock echoed at the bedroom door. Go away, David croaked, voice trembling, tears streaking his face. The door cracked open a little and Will's calm, steady presence appeared. David, it's me, can I come in? David shook his head, trying to swallow his sobs. No, just please leave me alone. Will stepped closer, voice gentle but firm. Hey, it's okay. You're having a panic attack, aren't you? David nodded, tears spilling over. Yes, just please leave. Will crouched beside the bed, keeping his tone soft. I'm not leaving, not yet, but I'm not going to crowd you either, just breathe with me, okay? In and out slowly. David's body shook as he followed Will's guidance, trying to match the slow rhythm. Will stayed by his side, silent but supportive, giving David the space he needed while making sure he wasn't alone. Minutes passed, the sobs softened, and though David's panic hadn't fully disappeared, the tight grip of fear eased slightly under Will's quiet, steady presence. Scott leaned against the counter, brows furrowed, eyes searching Ian for answers. Did I do something wrong? Ian sat down beside him, voice calm but serious. Scott, let's start at the beginning, when you and May hooked up. Scott's face tightened. So it's my fault. No, Ian said firmly. Not your fault, but right now David needs a scapegoat, someone to focus his anger on, and unfortunately he's been carrying a lot of pain from the wedding, the family lies, everything. He's hurting and he's looking for someone to blame. Scott exhaled slowly, running a hand over his face. I didn't mean to make things worse, I just... Ian put a reassuring hand on his shoulder. I know, you didn't, just be patient. David's emotions are raw, you and May both caused unintended chaos, but he's not angry at you personally, he just needs to process it. Scott nodded, swallowing hard. All right, I'll wait, I just want to fix things somehow. Ian gave a small, understanding nod. You're trying, that's a start. The room was quiet, soft sunlight spilling through the window. Tom stepped forward first, a small smile on his face. Thank you, Uncle David, he said sincerely, wrapping his arms around David. The hug was brief but full of affection, a quiet acknowledgement of everything David had done for them. Henry, standing nearby, watched with a proud expression. Peter, go ahead, hug your uncle, we're about to go. Peter hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward, wrapping his arms around David tightly. Thanks, Uncle David, he murmured. David ruffled their hair gently, feeling a warm sense of relief and connection. Anytime, guys, you two take care, all right? Henry nodded, guiding the boys toward the door. Come on, let's get going, you've got a long week ahead, but we'll handle it together. The boys waved briefly at David, their spirits lifted despite the recent chaos. For a moment, the storm of family drama felt distant, replaced by quiet reassurance and the strength of real bonds. David slumped back in his power chair, exhaustion written across his face. I feel like shit, he muttered, voice low. They basically saw me kill their own mom, emotionally at least. Will and Ian exchanged glances, then sat closer to him. What's going on in your head, bro? Will asked gently. David took a shaky breath. Tom, he told me something today. He said he told May that he was gay, not that he actually is, but he thought maybe if she could see him for himself, she could see me for me. Ian's eyes softened. Wow, that came from a 9-year-old. Yeah, David said, voice thick. And you know what? He knows their mom is wrong. He sees it even at 9, and that gives me some hope. Will nodded slowly. That's huge, man. Kids are honest and sometimes they see more than adults do. It means your message got through even if May's too blind to notice. David exhaled, a small, bittersweet smile forming. Yeah, maybe, just glad someone gets it. Ian reached over, resting a hand on David's arm. And we get it too, bro, you're not alone in this. For the first time that day, David felt the weight lift slightly, not all of it, but enough to breathe and start thinking about moving forward. David wheeled himself into the living room where Scott was waiting. His face was pale, eyes still glistening from lingering tears. Scott, David's voice shook slightly, that's why I had a panic attack. Their childhoods, they're gone, all that trust, all that innocence, it's just gone now. Scott's expression softened, his usual bravado replaced by concern. David, I didn't realize how deep it hit you. I thought I was just causing a scene with May, but... David shook his head, tears spilling freely now. It's more than that. Watching everything fall apart, knowing how it affected the boys, it's like watching their world crumble, and there's nothing I can do to fix it. Scott swallowed hard, nodding. I see that now, and I'm sorry, truly. I never meant to hurt anyone, least of all them or you. David exhaled slowly, letting some of the tension ease. I know you didn't mean it, but it still happened, and it'll take time to make it right. Scott nodded again, silent now, giving David the space to process, as the weight of the family drama hung heavy in the quiet room. Henry wheeled May into the living room, her chair rolling softly over the hardwood floor. David and Scott kept to the side, silent witnesses, while Tom and Peter stood in front of their mother. Tom's small hands were clenched into fists, his voice trembling but determined. Mother, Tom began, his eyes glistening, I told you I like boys. I thought if you didn't turn me away, maybe you would understand. Maybe you'd change your mind about Uncle David. May's face stiffened, her lips pressing into a thin line. But no, Tom continued, his voice cracking, when I told you you didn't hug me, you didn't tell me it was okay. You just went online looking for some camp to change me. His little shoulders shook, but he pressed on. Mom, you told us all the time God made us under his eyes, that's what you always said at bedtime. Peter, standing at his brother's side, finally spoke, his voice firmer than his age. So if God made everyone in his eyes, then what? Uncle David's the odd one out, he doesn't count. The room fell silent. The only sound was the hum of May's wheelchair as she shifted uncomfortably. David lowered his head, tears threatening, while Henry crossed his arms and waited. The children's words cut deeper than any adult argument ever could. May's voice came out flat, almost rehearsed. So that's how you feel? Fine. I saved money for both of you, $7 million each for college. That's all I can do. Let's end this sin conversation. Tom and Peter exchanged a look, a silent understanding passing between them. Tom's lip quivered, but he lifted his chin. Have a good life then, mother. Peter, his voice steady, added, Dad, can we please be excused? He glanced briefly toward May and said softly, May you. Henry's throat tightened, but he nodded. Yes, boys, go on. The two children walked out together, shoulders brushing, leaving May in her wheelchair, clutching her words and her silence. David whispered under his breath, even kids know what love should look like. The room hung heavy with the sound of her son's rejection, a truth May could not control, buy, or pray away. Henry's face twisted with years of pent-up rage. He leaned in, voice shaking but loud enough that May couldn't ignore him. You're just an evil bitch. I loved you for 35 years and all you ever did was treat me like shit. Do you even see what you've done? May's lips parted but nothing came out. Henry slammed his fist on the arm of the chair beside him. I go to the bar after work because there's nothing at home, No damn TV, no comfort, because you said it was sinful. Our kids have to use old books for homework. This year is 2025, not 1825. The only thing in that house from this century is your power chair and our phones. He paused, his breath ragged, eyes burning. You stole their childhood trying to prove you were righteous, but all you did was starve them of the world. May gripped her wheels, looking smaller than she ever had. But Henry wasn't finished, he finally had his turn to speak. Want me to carry this into May trying to defend herself but breaking down, or should I show Henry walking away, leaving her with the weight of what he said? Perfect follow-up here, Henry delivering that final gut punch line. Henry's voice dropped, no longer shouting but cold, sharp, and final. Get help, May, not from God, not from another preacher who tells you what you want to hear, from a real doctor. Because what you've been doing to me, to the kids, to David, it isn't faith, it's sickness. May swallowed hard, her hands frozen on the rims of her chair. Henry straightened up, his eyes never leaving hers. Until you do that, you'll never see us as a family again. With that, he turned his back and walked out, leaving her in silence. Later that night, after Henry's explosion, David found Scott sitting quietly in the kitchen. The room was dim, just the soft hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. David rolled in and asked carefully, besides the no TV. And the God 24/7, did I make you feel that way too? Scott let out a long breath, rubbing his hands together. In some ways, yeah, not everything but some of it. David's eyes dropped, guilt pooling heavy in his chest. I never wanted to be another cage for you. Scott shook his head, softer now. You weren't a cage, David, but sometimes being with you felt like I was carrying a weight I couldn't put down, not because of who you are, but because of how much you hurt, and I didn't know how to help without drowning in it myself. David nodded slowly, his throat tight, so I was both home and heavy. Scott's eyes watered. Yeah, and that's why it broke me, because I loved you in ways May could never reach, but I was too weak to carry it all. Would you like me to make this moment tense and unresolved, or more of a healing honesty between David and Scott? Here's a tender continuation with Tom and Peter stepping in. Tom and Peter quietly slid onto the couch beside David and Scott. Neither man spoke at first, they just let the boys settle in, the weight of everything still thick in the air. Tom finally broke the silence, his voice shaky. Uncle David, Dad, am I going to hell for what I said to Mother? David's eyes softened and he leaned forward in his power chair. Tom, listen to me. No, you're not going to hell. You spoke your truth because you wanted her to understand. That's not sin, that's courage. Peter chimed in, his small voice firm. Yeah, if anyone's going to hell, it's not us. We didn't do anything wrong, we just wanted her to stop hurting people. Scott reached over and put a hand on Tom's shoulder. Son, you're not going to hell. Don't ever let anyone make you believe that. You've got a good heart. That's what matters. Tom's eyes welled up, but she looked at me like I was the worst kid in the world, like I betrayed her. David's voice cracked as he answered, That's her blindness, Tom, not yours. God made you and Peter just as you are. If she can't see that, then it's on her, not you. Peter leaned his head against David's armrest, whispering, We just want to feel safe. Scott swallowed hard and pulled both boys close. You are safe with me, with your uncle, with your dad, and nothing changes that. Henry stepped into the room, his voice steady but gentle. All right, boys, it's late, we've all had a long day. He glanced at Tom and Peter, then at David and Scott. Tomorrow we'll go see Grandpa Ron, he's been asking about you too. Tom rubbed his eyes and gave a small nod. Okay, Dad. Peter stretched, his head still leaning against David's chair. Good night, Uncle, good night, Dad, good night, Papa. Henry gave both boys a light pat on the back. Come on, let's get you to bed. As the boys followed him down the hall, Tom turned back one last time. Uncle David. Yes, Tom. I feel better, thanks for talking to me. David managed a tired smile. Anytime, kiddo, sweet dreams. Scott sat quietly as the boys disappeared into their room, then exhaled a long, heavy breath. They're stronger than I ever was at their age. David nodded slowly, and they'll need that strength after everything. Later that night, Ian wheeled David back into the house. The air was quiet, almost heavy after the storm of the last few days. David slipped into his routine, chair parked by the sink, cathing supplies laid out, everything done with practiced motions. Ian leaned against the counter, watching. Do you want to talk? It's been a long 3 days. David sighed, setting the last piece of tubing aside. His voice was soft but steady. Ian, I am very grateful for you, for everything you do. If you ever feel I disrespected you in any way, tell me. Ian moved closer, resting a hand on David's shoulder. You never disrespected me, you just carry a lot and sometimes it spills over. That's not disrespect, it's being human. David's eyes brimmed but didn't spill over. Then thank you for letting me be human. The two of them sat in the quiet hum of the house, finally, for the first time in days, breathing easier. Will knocked lightly before entering. Ian stepped out of David's bedroom, a small, knowing smile on his face. He had a break, Ian said softly, eyes still on David's closed door. Thought about May, Henry, all that chaos, about their thoughts, their anger, all the stuff they've done, and he finally let it go. Will nodded, understanding immediately. He told Scott basically the same thing. Like Henry and May, Scott's got his part in it, but it's time to stop carrying it all himself. Outside, the house was quiet for the first time in days. David's routine completed, the cath done, his chair parked just so, he rested back with a rare calm settling over him. Ian whispered he's breathing easier, for now at least. Will smiled faintly, leaning against the doorway. Yeah, he earned this peace. And for the first time in a long, chaotic week, the house felt like a home again.